Hi, my name is Alex Casano and I'm the events coordinator here at the Clearwater Historical Society. Today we'll be having a representative from the American Victory ship, which is a historic World War II ship located in Tampa, Florida, now a museum. So I hope you enjoy this presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Robert Casey. I am the museum committee head from the American Victory that's down there in Channelside. My interest in history started a long time ago, and for myself, it's amazing how much that we don't pay attention to what's actually around us. One of those being the American Victory. You know, the American Victory, we found a way to hide a 455-foot vessel. It's unbelievable, but we have actually found that trick. Okay, but so if anybody's ever interested to come down and visit us, we are down at the Channelside, behind the aquarium. Okay? One of the passions about working at the American Victory for myself is I'm an avid modeler, and so as you can see for myself, what I've done is I've taken the time to actually build the American Victory where we didn't have an actual model in our ship, of our own ship. So I took the time to build this. The model took 6 months, and it took 300 man-hours to build. So again, we're here to talk about the American Victory, but before we speak about the American Victory itself, I want to go back in history and actually talk about a little bit more of what made up the American Victory, what made up the Liberty ships that we actually had, and the Victory ships that we had, and that would be the Merchant Mariners, what we call the unsung heroes. It wasn't for the Merchant Mariners that we actually had during World War II, none of this would have happened. I mean, these gentlemen, they were civilians. They were with the group, and they were transporting all our goods. So what wins a war is supplies. And so without these supplies, we would have nothing. There was two primary rules for the Merchant Mariners, okay? And it's when in doubt, lights out, and loose lips sink ships that you probably have all heard of before. And the reason being is, one of their main things that they had a problem with was U-boats. Okay, so at night they would have to batten down the hatches, lock all the windows. No light is to come off that ship. None. Because if you see even a cigarette lit, you can see that on the dark horizon. So they had to be very careful at night. And of course, the loose lips sink ships. If you ever talk about your mission while at home, it's a probability somebody's there listening, and next thing you know, you're going to be going down. Now, bringing that up, the U-boat, okay, the Unterseeboot, as we would say, the undersea boat, or as we always like to call it, the U-boat. Okay, there was 1,162 built during World War II. They went 17 knots on the surface and 7 knots underwater. During the World War II, they sunk 2,779 ships in World War II, which we'll come back to later. By the end of the war, 785 were destroyed, and the West were surrendered to the Allies. It was what they called the U-boat happy time. And the reason it was called that is because at the beginning of the war, they had 46 U-boats, okay? And they, by 45, at the end of the war, they had 863 of them, okay? At first, the U-boats went out individually, and then by September of 1940, they decided that they're going to start doing what's called wolf packs. And with the wolf packs, they went out 4, 5, even up to 45 and 50 all together in one mission. So with that, we weren't ready for this kind of war. We weren't ready for an undersea war where, you know, where merchant ships were pretty much unarmed, which we'll again get back to later. As it said, eventually the British beefed up their convoy and escorts and air support, and their losses decreased as the war went on. As you can see by the graph at the bottom, so through 1939 to 1942, you can see that these these U-boats were, I mean, they were dominating. You were looking at almost 1,100 to 1,200 in 1942. I mean, they were sinking a lot. And people said, well, it was the Enigma Code. Actually, the Enigma Code was actually broken in 1941. So they still had more time, or I'm sorry, in 1940. So they had more time with this. So let me jump ahead to the next one. Here's another part that people don't understand. People always say, well, the war was over in Europe. Actually, it wasn't. It was actually everywhere. And this is just off the coast of the United States. So what we're seeing here is, if you look at, if you can see it in the color, yeah, all the light blue, that is 1942. Okay? So in 1942, this is just, like I said, this is off the coast of the United States. They actually manned, they assigned the U-boats to come over to the United States and just stay right outside our waters. And actually, the closest sinking that we actually had in the United States was over here in the Mississippi River, right there by New Orleans. The U-boat was actually closer to the United States than the merchant ship was. So, yes, we did have a lot of sinkings just off the United States coast. I want to get into a couple of the different battles, or let's just say maritime battles that they had, because these right here will show how affected the merchant marines were and the merchant ships were during this time. Now, excuse me if I torture the names here. The Murmansk Run was a convoy PQ-17. It departed from Arkhangelsk. I didn't torture that name. But that was in June 26, 1942. 33 merchant ships, plus one oiler, went on that trip. And they had with them 3 rescue ships, 5 destroyers, 3 corvettes, minesweeping, and the list goes on what they had with them. Well, but here's the unfortunate part, that they were getting some scuttlebutt that if you guys have ever heard of the battleship Tirpitz, the German ship Tirpitz. Okay, this was the sister ship to the Bismarck. Okay, big warship. And so to avoid a big naval loss, they went and they called the naval forces away from the convoy and said that we don't want to lose this much, you guys have to fend on their own. Okay? In this case here, that they were ended up from July 4th to July 14th, they ended up Nazi torpedoes and U-boats launched repeatedly for days. Okay? So out of the 33 merchant ships, or 34 including the oiler, only 11 reached their destination. Okay? So with that, 24 were sunk along with 153 mariners, armed guard, 25,000 tons of war material, including 3,500 trucks, 200 aircraft, 435 tanks. And the ones that did survive these attacks ended up as German POWs. Another one that I wanted to talk about was what they call the greatest convoy battle. Here we go. The greatest convoy battle that happened in March 1943. 88 merchant ships, some carrying airplanes, gasoline, ammunition, troops, and 15 escorts. The convoy actually averaged at 6.9 knots. If you can imagine going across the ocean at 6.9 knots, okay, which is just above 7 miles per hour. Okay, 45 U-boats attacked these 2 convoys. Okay. British and escorts used 298 depth charges, 90 torpedoes, and in the end, 22 ships were sunk and 372 were dead. Okay? And the main reason I wanted to show these slides was because the service and the sacrifice of the high seas, as we're going to call it, over 3.1 million tons were lost during World War II. Due to these U-boat attacks. Mariners died at a rate of 1 in 24. That's actually higher than any other branch during World War II. So if you're talking at rate, we were dying at 1 in 24. 8,651 merchant mariners paid the ultimate price, and 733 American cargo ships were lost. One other group of gentlemen I want to talk about before we get into the ships itself is the U.S. Navy Armed Guard. Navy Armed Guard was another group of people that people never heard of. Why? Because they were just actually stationed to the Liberties and the Victory ships. Okay? And with the Navy Armed Guard, what was the purpose of the Navy Armed Guard? Was they were there to man the guns, they were there to do the radio controls, and they were also there for the medical. Now, one thing you have to understand about our ships, with the Victories and the Liberties, is that medical was basically you had a corpsman, and here's a Band-Aid, and here's an aspirin. Okay, there wasn't much medical on the ships. If you come on to the American Victory now, you'll see that we had 2 rooms, and they weren't even manned. They had this corpsman that would come aboard, and like I said, basic, as you would see in the war, with World War II, a corpsman's job was just to go out and render first aid when they got hit, and then it would go to an actual surgeon. We didn't have a surgeon. So if somebody was actually fully needing of a medical attention, they'd have to be transported to a different ship. Okay? So kind of going down my list here that I put together. So they maintain the ship's defenses, they maintain safe and ready custody of the ship's ammunition storage, ensure that there were sufficient ready magazines of the Oregon 20mm guns, maintain sunrise and sunset submarine and anti-aircraft watches, store general lookout and necessary stands, watch stands, and keeping up their military duties. And they also train approximately about half of the Merchant Marines to be backup. So as you've probably seen in the first slide that I showed with the Merchant Marines, is that they were the backup. So normally the crew would be about maybe 25 to 26 U.S. Navy Armed Guard, but that's not enough to actually man the weapons. The weapons actually take about 11 people to run each 3-inch and 5-inch that's on the vessel. So already you're talking 22 people, plus there's 8 Oregon 20mm, and those took 5 people apiece. So we had a lot less people that need to be learn these weapons. So those U.S. Navy Armed Guard taught the merchant mariners how to also man those weapons in case they're hit or something went wrong. Okay. So let's get into the ships. Why were they built? Well, emergency shipbuilding program started in 1940 and went to 1945. And with the history that I've given, and you can understand why, is with the German U-boats, they were knocking them out faster than we could build them. Okay? So with that, government effort to quickly build simple cargo ships, as they're calling it. Now, they carried troop supplies, allies during World War II. They are run by the U.S. Maritime Commission, and they built 87,000 ships in the total from 1939 to 1945. Okay? Like I said, the Germans were knocking them out just as fast as we could build them. Now, where did this idea come from? The idea came from Henry Kaiser. Okay, Henry Kaiser was, as you can see, he was an industrialist, and he founded more than 100 companies with aluminum, steel, cement, gypsum. From 1914 to 1930, he built dams, California, Mississippi River, highways, bridges in Cuba, and he ran 7 shipyards during World War II. Okay, so I'm just going to pop to the next slide. And this is what was called the Kaiser Empire. Okay, so this was all around the United States. Okay, so as you can see, Kaiser actually had stuff along the East Coast and the West Coast. Okay, and he was building stuff for aircraft, he was building stuff for boats, he was building for ships. And what he was doing was he was introducing a method that we haven't used yet. It was actually the first streamlining of ships. Okay, we could produce a ship every 4 days. Okay, so with that, it was kind of like a modern-day modular home. Okay, so what they would do is they would build the components elsewhere, and then when they get to the shipyard, they would put them all together. The fastest they put a ship together, and we'll get into it again, the fastest that the ship that they put together was the Robert E. Perry, and the Robert E. Perry was built in 4 days. Okay, so the guarantee that Henry Kaiser gave to the distributors was everything was going to be built in 55 days, max 55 days. We're going to build a ship in 55 days. So with that, that was their guarantee. Now, as you can see, As you can see here, the growth of the merchant fleet was from 1942 to 1946. Okay, and it says that one symbol equals equals pre-war fleet of 600,830,000 deadweight tons is what was produced from 1942 to 1946. Okay. Let's start with the Liberty ships. The Liberty ship was actually the predecessor to the Victory ship that we have today in the channel side of the American Victory. Okay, the Liberty ships were, just to go kind of the basics of what it was 441 feet long, 57 foot wide, and displaced 14,000 tons. I could get into all of this, but I'd like to stick to the basics. Okay, what was the biggest differences between the ships? Well, the maximum speed of the Liberty ship was 11 knots. Okay, and it had only it was built by Alice Champers, but they only had a 2,500 horsepower triple expansion steam engine. One steam engine, 3 piston. Okay, and that was 2,500 horsepower. Of course, it wasn't fast enough to outrun a German U-boat at 11 knots. Like I said, the German U-boats could go at 17 knots. Okay, so, and when they were on the surface. So yeah, they were out of luck when it came down to that. So during the war, 2,700 were built. 2,751 Liberties were built from 1941 to 45, making them the largest class of ships built worldwide at the time. This is the first mass-produced ship in history. Okay. Moving over to the Victory ship. Okay, now the Victory ship was a little longer. It was 455 feet long, 62 feet wide, 28-foot draft, and displaces 15,000 tons. Now, let's stick to the main purpose of this. What is the max speed for them? Was 17.5 to 18.5 knots, varying the Liberties by 6+ knots. So right there is a big benefit for them when it came down to the U-boats, because a U-boat would have to submerge normally, to do their attacks and stuff, and they could only go max 7 knots. So we could almost outrun them, actually, without a problem in the Victories. Okay, they have a 6,000 to 9,000 horsepower engine, steam turbines. Okay, built by Alice Champers still, but they improved from a 3-piston to now a steam turbines. Okay, and they had a range of 2,300 miles. Let's see, they had enough to outrun, and they built 534 Victories during World War II. Now, we still have these ships, as we said. We have the American Victory sitting in Channelside, but there's also more. There's the SS Jeremiah O'Brien, which is a Liberty ship that's sitting over in San Francisco. We have the John W. Brown Liberty ship sitting in Baltimore. And we have the SS Arthur Huddle, which actually I just learned about 2 weeks ago. The Arthur Huddle is now called the Hellas Liberty, and it's sitting over in Athens. After the war, they were bought by a private company, converted into a more of an industrial ship, and now over in Greece, they converted to a museum just like we did in the United States. Now on to the Victories. Like I said, we have the American Victory here. We have the Lane Victory sitting in San Pedro, California. And we have the Red Oak Victory that's in Richmond, California. Now Richmond, California is one of the home of Kaiser's, one of his yards. So let's get to the guest of honor, the American Victory. Okay, American Victory was built in what they call for short, Cal Ship. Okay. Cal Ship was 40,000 employees. Okay, there was 282,000 employees overall between all the shipyards, but there was 4,000. So if you can imagine 40,000 employees over 3 shifts, you're talking over 10,000 plus people a shift building these ships. Okay, just at this one location. The first ship that was produced at Cal Ship was the USS John Fremont, rolled into the water on September 27, 1941. Cal Shipyard closed in September 1945 after launching its last Victory ships 4 years to the minute after the first one slid into the water. why the American Victory? People are like, oh, it's, victory, it's America. Actually, no, it's named after a university. A lot of the ships were named after universities, countries, counties. So with that, that's where the name American Victory came from. It's actually named after the American University. Well, why American University? Well, American University was established in December of 1892, and the birthplace of actually the chemical weapons program during World War I. Now, during World War II, it was actually still utilized by the military, and it was done with the U.S. Navy Bomb Disposal School was there, and we had the WAVES, which was the Women's Accepted for the Volunteer Emergency Service. So we actually had the WAVES there. Now, each ship has a certain type to it, and it's the VC2 SAP2. Well, what does that mean? Okay, what does that all mean to just normal people? Okay, so I broke it down. The V stands for victory, with the victory class, which it was. It was a cargo ship, so there's your C. 2 was the length of water line between 400 and 500 feet. So in other words, for the length of the ship between 4 and 500, that's where you get that number designation to. The S stands for steam, because it was a steam vessel. It ran on diesel, but it was a steam vessel. Okay, it was auxiliary, so it did carry the supplies as kind of like cargo. Personnel, because we did carry people, and it was the second ship in its design, or second design in its series. Now, what is the difference between the first series and the second series? Well, when I built that model that I showed earlier, you definitely see the differences. I had to take, and I've taken over 500 pictures of our own ship just to show all the differences between the original Victories and ours. Because when I received the model plans, it was from 1946, and it was for the original Victory, so it didn't match ours. So I had to go and convert a lot of things on my own. Okay, let's jump to the next. Construction of the American Victory. Okay, constructed a Cal ship, like we said. The official number of the vessel is 24,805. That is the official number. Keel was laid on March 30th, 1945, and the Master Carpenter Certificate was filed in the Bureau of Customs on May 19th, 1945. This ship did take the exact 55 days. Okay. Sea trials for the American Victory were on June 18th, 1945. Delivered to the War Service Administration on June 20th, 1945. It was constructed in 55 days, and it came under the hull number of 792. Okay? It cost $2.5 million to build the American Victory in 1945. Today, it would cost approximately $40 million, okay, to build this ship. Now, looking at the numbers in our economy these days, it actually comes up to $37 million. So it's a little less, but it's around that. Now, one thing I wanted to get into also about World War II is when companies had to transition to support the war. Now, it's amazing to me when some companies will take and go completely a different direction from what they normally do. And I actually brought up a few of them. Lionel built compasses for ships. So the Lionel trains. Okay, Ford built the V-24 Liberator bombers. Ford company. And Maytag, the wonderful people that build our washing machines, okay, build exhaust systems for the B-26 Marauders during World War II. Now, why am I bringing this up? I mentioned on both our Victories and the Liberties, they had Alice Champers engines, okay? And it kind of actually blew my mind when I looked into Alice Champers, because if you look up here in the corner here, that's what they built. They built tractors. That's what Alice Champers did, right? No. Actually, if you take a look at all these pictures that are around the center here, you'll see that they actually got into, let's see, the M6 and M24 high-speed tractors, low-speed tractors, snow tractors. They developed propeller shafts and propellers for submarines and warships. The B-17 turbochargers, 90-millimeter anti-aircraft guns, 16-inch battleship cradles. I mean, I could go over the rest of them. But interesting enough, they actually helped the Manhattan Project. They actually built part of the atomic bomb. So this little tractor company decided that they were going to go another direction during the war and actually produced a lot of stuff during the war. So not only did we receive our engines, a lot of other people received things also during the war. Now, what is on the American Victory for armaments? Okay, we have the 3-inch Mark 50, 22 Mod 3s. Okay, so that's our 3-inch gun on the front of the vessel. Okay, that gun can shoot 2.4 miles. Okay, and then you have the, I'm going to jump to the other side, to the 5-inch. The 5-inch on the other side can shoot 9.2 miles. And or like in 20 millimeters, or anti-aircraft guns, you know, they have maximum range 4,800 yards, but of course when you're shooting up in the air, it's always depending on the winds. Now, the reason I bring this up, these 3 weapons do how much good to a submarine? Absolutely none. They really don't. Unless that submarine is surfaced and coming after them, those guns are absolutely useless. The guns that are actually, the 20 millimeters came more useful for the Liberties during the war due to the fact of kamikazes and the loose bottles. Okay? So you did have some purpose on those, but the other guns, not much of the use of anything. Okay? Here we have the dedication of the American Victory. American Victory was 442. That was the number that they had. That was the number that they had for the American Victory as she was launched. Okay, and she was launched on May 24th, 1945 by Mrs. J. McKillen, Mrs. William Mack, and Commodore Schuyler F. Hine. Okay. We just received those pictures actually over on American Victory about maybe 6 months ago. So it was really great that we could actually find the launching of our ship. American Victory's maiden voyage during World War II, June of 1945 and February 1946. Now, the thing to understand about the American Victory is, of course, like I said, this is 1945. Okay, so we're at the tail end of this war. And the reason that the American Victory, or I should say Victory ships themselves, were actually built was due to the fact that, like I said, the originals were 11 knots. Okay, we were going very slow in the water, but we're looking to speed up the process, but now we're looking at the invasion of Japan by 1945. Okay, so with that, we wanted to build these ships that could get over there and get the job done. Well, by the time the American Victory was built, and she was all loaded up and ready to head over, well, by August, we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and the war's over. So we're heading over there, and there's not much left to do. So with that, we had to repurpose what was going on. So what happened was, but they had Operation Downfall. It was, well, that was the name of the invasion of Japan, sorry. And what ended up happening was, instead of going to Japan to drop all the supplies that we had, we ended up changing that over to, we ended up in the Philippines at Manila Bay. And we started with the Marshall Plan. And we started to do the support for the Marshall Plan. Again, maiden voyage. Okay, the war ends, as I discussed. Okay, and American Victory's journey begins from September 22nd, 1945. She was in Shanghai. First cargo ship with the American flag to actually pull port after the Japanese were defeated. Multiple visits, as it says, Shanghai, Philippines, Japan, before heading west to Calcutta in India, port said in Japan, Egypt, and through the Mediterranean Sea. So she was bound for Japan, but she ended up going a lot more other places. So you're talking from June to December of 46, she was out over a year. First voyage ended on February 4th, 1946 in the New York Harbor. And as I mentioned earlier, she was part of the Marshall Plan. Okay? United Nations Relief and Marshall Plan missions. She did 2 voyages through the 10th from 1946 to 1952. And she sailed over 117,943 nautical miles. All right. So she transported everything from vehicles through the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and the Far East. and she also did some ice-breaking duties at that time. Now, one thing to understand about the American Victory, even though she was built very late during World War II, she did serve in 3 wars. She served in World War II for a couple months. She served in Korea, and she served in Vietnam. Now, with that being said, in between World War II and the Korean War, she was brought to James Fleet and put into mothballs, and then they decided to reactivate the Korean War. After the Korean War, they put her in mothballs again, and then reinstated again for Vietnam. Okay, so we have a little bit about the Korean War. She actually did 11 voyages through the Korean War from 1952-53, 90,000 nautical miles. And of course it says, though the ship was never in danger, the first trip to Ishkan, there was delay because the U.S. artillery fire on the city. American Victory's most solemn duties during the conflict was transporting the bodies of the fallen back to the United States for burial. Now, interesting enough, and a quick story I want to put out there, I met a gentleman about 2 weeks ago, actually, and it was amazing. He was 91 years old. He was on Victories, but not the American Victory per se, but he was on a Victory. And one of his trips to Europe was, his job was to pick up 8,000 U.S. dead soldiers. They were exhumed because people in the United States wanted their bodies back in the United States to bury in Arlington and other places over here. So they had those 8,000 men exhumed, and that was his job, was to bring all those soldiers home. So it was amazing to meet this gentleman. It's funny because this gentleman, like I said, he was 91 years old, but he gave me a tour of my own ship. He knew where everything was. He knew it's things like that that made me appreciate what I do. That you see a gentleman that giddy as a schoolboy come on board and tell me how it goes. It was great. Okay, so Vietnam, we had 18 voyages through Vietnam. No, I'm sorry, the 18 voyages 18 through 28. I realize now that these are numbered. Please understand, I didn't write some of these slides. So, yes, to put it in retrospect, the American Victory did 29 voyages altogether. And so I see what they did here. They put voyages 18 through 28 from 1966 to 1969 is when she did those voyages. And she did 238,000 nautical miles through that time. Let's see, it shows the significance of the maritime service in the Vietnam War. AMVIC made more voyages and steamed more nautical miles from Vietnam than any other operation. Voyages 19 to Vietnam was nearly the ship's final mission. AMVIC survived the Typhoon Dinah, overloaded with telephone poles. Now, we actually still have damage on our vessel from that. We were carrying telephone poles, but interesting enough, one of them broke loose, and it actually shot through one of our cabins on the aft of the ship, and you can still see a little bit of the damage from that. Let's see, and here's just a picture of her loaded up with ordnance in South Africa, bound for Vietnam in 1968. But one thing I want to kind of go back on with the Merchant Marines, because it kind of reminded me as I saw that slide, was understanding the job of the Merchant Marine is, a Merchant Marine is only paid while he's underway. Okay, he's not paid when he's sitting in port. And it takes the American Victory, or any Victory ship, or any Liberty ship, mind you, it takes 3 days to load and then 3 days to unload. So that's 6 days right there already that you're not underway. Not only that, is that when you do a convoy of, per se, 33 merchant ships, as we heard at one point, let's just say you're going to the Philippines. Well, we know how big their ports are. Wait, they don't have any. So what it is they had to build ports. So they had 2 ports built. So now you have 33 ships. It takes 3 days to unload. So now somebody could be sitting there for weeks at a time, just waiting to get moving. So you're not being paid that whole time. So what is it about a Merchant Marine that's different? Well, a Merchant Marine is not actually stationed to a ship. A Merchant Marine actually can go to any one of the Liberties or Victories. Okay, and with that being said, the 2 most important things that you have to understand is how is the food and how is the captain. Those are the two most important things to a merchant marine when it comes to what vessel they go to. Because if the food's terrible and the captain's not good, they'll stay on their ship until another one becomes available. So when you go to look up a history of a merchant marine and say, oh, well, what ship was he stationed to? He wasn't. He wasn't stationed to a ship. All you can do is look up his name and maybe find him through the records. Okay? The voyage for the American Victory, voyage 29, was actually coming to Tampa Bay. So what it was Captain Timmel, okay, decided that he wanted to grab one of these ships out of the fleet. It's still sitting up there in James River Fleet, just rusting away. Now, I didn't bring any today, but the pictures that you would see of this ship when we first received the American Victory, yes, it looks pretty from the outside, but if you looked at the deck, this ship looked like it belonged on the bottom of the ocean, not on the top. It was really, really beat up. As you can probably see in the picture, there's no booms on there. There was no winches. There was nothing on board. Everything was below deck. And we also ended up with a lot of extra gear that somebody threw on there from other vessels. Okay? So she was in really, really, really rough shape when she came into port. Now, I could go on and on and on and bring you books upon books about restoration of American Victory. This shows one slide. Maybe I might have another one in here. Nope, that's it, one slide. This is such an understatement, okay? The restoration of the American Victory is still going on today. We received the ship in 1999, okay? When we received the ship, it cost over $1 million to start restoration. Ever since '99, we've been working on it. Right now, we are still converting rooms and actually opening doors and finding floors that are gone, okay? Because it's taking a lot to bring this ship back to life. Now, with that being said, this ship is also 100 times better than it was when it first arrived. There's so much more to her that she's under her own power right now. This ship was a 20-year ship. So you have to understand, when they built the Liberties and they built the Victories, okay, the Liberties were supposed to last 5 years. Okay, that was their lifespan. The Victories were 20-year lifespan. That's it. And then they had no more use to these ships. Well, they were able to keep these ships going. So that's why I'm saying it's amazing that you still have 3 Liberty ships and 3 Victories still existing today. We're talking 76 years later, and these ships are still going. And like I said, the American Victory is under her own power. This ship can move on her own steam engines. And that was just as of recently, we had the boilers fixed, so now we can go. And just so you all know, we do tours with the American Victory. The American Victory gets underway twice a year. Of course, with COVID and everything that's happened over the last year or two, we weren't able to get out and go on underway, but we will be again soon. So we're looking at 2022 to get underway again, so we can bring people on trips. And what we do is we go out to the St. Pete, we go out to the Skyway Bridge, and we'll turn around and we'll come back in. It's about a 4 or 5 hour trip, and we have live bands. We have, when I say live bands, I'm talking Andrew Sister style here. We're talking World War II music. We're talking reenactors from World War II. We have food and everything on board. So it's a good time to get out and see that. I'll get back to that when I get to those slides. We actually have an active radio room on board. This ship still, every Saturday, sends out signals over to California and other places. Kind of like the old ham radio, and they also do a Morse code. So they sit in their little room all day and just beep, 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 beep on Saturdays. So it's actually kind of cool that when people come aboard, they get to see these people actually do this stuff. And these guys are very active. It's amazing to watch. And, of course, they're showing the... One thing I didn't cover earlier, I actually want to just touch back on it too, the U.S. Navy Armed Guard, because just the picture reminded me of it. This U.S. Navy Armed Guard, the Merchant Marines had the ship itself, and they had rooms with 4 people in it, and it was very comfortable and all that wonderful jazz. The U.S. Navy Armed Guard, there's 17 people in that little room. This room was not that big, and there was 17 cots, not even beds, they had cots. So the U.S. Navy Armed Guard did not get to live the luxury that the Merchant Marine did. It sounds like there's, I say luxury for the Merchant Marine, but still, compared to what the U.S. Navy and Armed Guard did, these poor guys. I can imagine when you go lights out at night, everything's buckled up, and you probably haven't had a shower in a day, and there's 17 of you. Yeah, I guess it get pretty tight in that room. We do have a picture of Captain Timmel. He is actually the gentleman that's third from the left there. Okay, that's Captain Timmel. He's the one that actually brought the ship to Tampa Bay. Okay, and this was the first live history cruise that they were talking about here. It was in September 20th, 2003. Had 497 passengers in a shakedown cruise. Okay, now when I say the shakedown cruise, was basically that's your first time out. Okay, basically giving rebirth to the American victory. One of our gentlemen on the ship right now, his name is Gary Brooks. He's one of our docents. He's actually one of our most knowledgeable docents, and he is amazing to listen to, because when you talk about a gentleman who's been in the service for 20 years, you hear a lot of stories. Well, this gentleman's been on this ship for 20 years, so he's got a lot of stories to tell. He brings us down the Shaft Alley. He'll tell you stories. And another story I didn't bring up, but I'll bring it up now, is that we have the boilers on our ship, and he loves to tell this story. Our boilers on our ship were tested on April 12th, 1945. Can anybody tell me what happened on April 12th, 1945? That was the death of FDR. So on the same exact days that our engines were tested, or our boilers were tested on our ship, at the same exact day that FDR died. And that's one of the stories that Gary loves to tell. But if you come on board, he'll tell you a lot more. Okay. So I'm done with this part, but now we're going to get into some pictures that we do have from the American victory. Now, understand, this is the original. The original paint job that we had on the American victory. You come down today, and it's a completely different paint job. Now we have what's called dazzle paint. Dazzle paint came up in 1941. During World War I. Okay, and what it was, how do you want to say, give it a little pizzazz. It's like when people put dazzle paint on and stuff, you know. It's just basically, you're just looking to spruce it up. So if you come down now, we have a lot different paint job. Yeah, okay, so again, we went out on March 23rd, 2019. I think that's probably our last one also. I don't think we've been out since. I've seen that picture so many times, it's embedded in my head. Actually, let me go back for a minute. That is what I'm speaking about when it comes down to the dazzle paint. So if you come down today, that is what we have with the paint on there. So what we do is, while we go underway, we actually do funerals, we do weddings. Gary Brooks, as I was just speaking of, he's also a chaplain. So he is one of the original shakedown crews. He's actually a merchant marine. He was when we did the original shakedown cruise, he wanted to be part of it. So what he did was he went and he became a merchant marine. But he's been a chaplain from the military since he was young. So with him, he can conduct any services. So on board, we do have them do, like I said, we have weddings. We do funerals underway. We also get support from the Sea Cadets, as you can see here. And so the Sea Cadets help us out during big events, and they take care of all they actually stay on board also. Once we can start opening that up, they'll stay on board, and they conduct some of their drills on board the ship. Again, another picture of Timo. And then, as I was saying, on these cruises, we do have like the Andrews Sisters kind of thing, where they do sing the period music and perform. And we have the veterans that will also come on board. Nowadays, like I said, it's a lot tougher to get the World War II because a lot of them are passing away. Again, one of the things we like to advertise, I guess, is volunteers. I'm a volunteer myself. I've volunteered on the ship now for about a year, or a little over a year now, and we're always looking for more volunteers because, like I said, the ship is a never-ending project. We want to keep her going, and next year she's going to go in the dry dock, and we're looking to get her spruced up again. Now, Bob Stanley, a gentleman, is also on the ship. He's also up in his 80s. This gentleman's, we have a place called Stanleyville, and this gentleman, he's amazing. He does our metal work, and he does all the things for our shipwright. We have also a gentleman that does the lines. I mean, these volunteers are amazing when they come on board, and the things that they do, and it's the history that you learn is what makes this job, like I said, this volunteer job, enjoyable. Here's one of our young guys. He's working on one of our rails. That's down in our machine shop down by the engines. There's our bridge being repainted by some more volunteers. So what we'll have is them come down, when I say them, I should say different units. We'll have firefighters, we'll have different groups of people that will come down and they'll help volunteer, and they'll help just take a section of the ship and they'll start working on that, and they'll redo it for us. We actually have engineers that will come on board for 2 weeks at a time also, and they'll go down and working on the engine room. We do a lot of fundraisers, events, so what it is we'll have people come on board the ship, we'll do birthdays, we do a lot of stuff, and we'll get to the slides soon, but yeah, we do a lot of extra stuff on the ship now, so if anybody's ever interested, they can come down to the ship and do events. We do the 4th of July, we do the New Year's, we did an event for the Super Bowl. So when the Super Bowl was won by Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year, they had an event after that where people can come on board and see the boat parade from the ship. I'm not going to get too much into the Propeller Club and Crab Fest fundraiser because I'm not very familiar with them, so I don't want to talk about it too much due to the fact that I don't know much. Like I said, some of these slides were put in from our directors and stuff. They're part of the Propeller Club, and they are pretty much, as you can see, it was a fundraiser, and we did some stuff with that. As you can see, it was pretty big. One of the things about the American Victory was we did not build her back to her original state. Okay, if we were to look at it, right here would be a winch, and right here would be a winch up in these corners. But instead, they built a soundstage, more of a stage here. So we can, when we do go underway, we have these events, we can have a band there. And like I said, during these cruises that we do, we can have our singers be up there, and we actually have on the 2 hold covers on 2 and 3 dance floors, so people can actually dance on the hold covers. We do tours, kids, so we have a lot of tours for the children, and they come on board, and so as we're getting, like I said, we're getting out of the COVID stage here, we are doing a lot more tours, and it's great when the kids can come on board and they're interested in American history, and they get to learn. What's actually neat about our 3-inch, it actually still rotates, so the kids can play with rotating the 3-inch on the front of the ship. We actually have models come on too, and do photo shoots on the ship. That was one of the tall ships coming up alongside of us. One of the other things about the American Victory, which is interesting, because like I said, this is the aquarium right here in our background. So what it is that we have water barges that will come in, and we actually have to help them put fresh salt water into the aquarium. So we help them by putting the lines over the water lines over our ship. The undead in the water. So every October we have a haunted house. That's what we do. We convert the ship to a haunted house. And so what happens during COVID, what do we do? Okay, well, we actually had an event based on a virus. So everybody had to wear a mask. So it actually worked out really well. And it really did. It was funny because we had an event where they said they had to spray your hands at the beginning to make sure you're not infected from this zombie virus they had on the ship. And of course it was just sanitizer, and then they had to shoot your hands at the end of it just to make sure that was the antidote. So it actually really worked out. It's kind of convenient. It worked out really well. But we do that every year in September and October. Of course, there's some pictures of some of our guys. That wasn't last year, of course. We are still an active ship. Okay, and what do I mean by that? We still train firefighters, we train the Navy SEALs, we train with the police, we train all types of first responders and military. So you can see you have the firefighters there scaling down the side of our ship there, and other events that they work with. Another picture of our firefighters. Yeah, the Navy SEALs will come on and do the intercept a terrorist interception on the ship. Again, more training, going down into the holds, confined spaces.
Do you ever partner with the Coast Guard?
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I do partner with the Coast Guard also. Police dog had to go find. And I can't see what their symbols are, but more training for the military. Oh, those are the police. That's what they were. So the ship went in the dry dock in 2016, which is, when we go into dry dock, it's amazing to watch because you see the ship come up out of the water. And right now we have a lot of oysters stuck to the back showing there, but we have a lot more now. So she's actually due to go in dry dock next year, and we're going to spruce her up again. So we've got some pictures here when she went in the dry dock, and you can see what kind of shape she was in. And that was the original paint job, like I was saying before, I think it was, right? Yeah, I believe that's our original paint job before we did the dazzle paint on it. But yeah, you can see, just so you understand, she is floating. She's not sitting on the bottom of the channel. She's floating. So, and this is, of course, after, like I said, the beautiful dazzle paint. I'll give you guys a little secret, too, that I've learned. Go back one slide here. Tampa Bay Lightning.
What was it?
The Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh.
There's a lightning logo on the side of it. It's hidden, but hidden well. There's a lot more vivid. So basically, the question is, how can you support? What it comes down to is that what we ask is just, we look for volunteers. We ask for people to come on down and help us out. Like I said, for myself, this was a life changer for me. You come in, and I only came in as a docent. I only wanted to be a tour guide, that's it. Now I'm the museum committee head, and I'm doing a lot of things in the museum. Again, I built a model to show people what it looked like during World War II. We have now introduced a QR tour. Okay, we just started that last Friday. Okay, so we just started a QR tour, so when people come on board, there's so much more information that if we can't display it, you can see it. We have a model of a World War II sea wound. It's a full scale, 1-to-1 scale of the sea wound. And with that, we were able to put the QR tour. That one's the 4th in its series. You get to see the first 3 series of that. Salamander, the beaver, you know. So there's so much more. There's videos, there's information. So we love to just promote that when you come on board the American Victory today, there's so much more to learn that you can see. And I welcome anybody to come down and see us. I welcome anybody to come and help volunteer with us. We always could use more people who are interested in history. It doesn't matter the age. I mean, I've found that there are people that are, you know, the older who want to come in and help, and then I'm so happy to know that we have younger people now that are coming down to help out and are interested in American history. So, yeah, I thank everybody for coming, and I wish you all a good day.